Hey you, and welcome to Happy Sex Ed! Today we are going to do a Q&A video. So I will be answering all your questions that you have written under my videos or sent me on Instagram. This video will also function as a little 100 subscribers special. Obviously, I'm very late with that. However, I was moving, so I have an excuse. Before we start, I want to encourage you to also leave questions either under this video or in a little poll that I will be creating these days. Since we are still such a cozy little community, your chances of having your questions answered in the next Q&A are very, very high. So, just saying that so you know what's up. And I would suggest we jump right into question 1. So, I will be reading the questions from my screen. Question 1 is, how to improve your sex life without pressuring one another if one desires intimacy more than the other? That is actually a really common question. And I want to start off by saying that having differences in desire is completely normal. Also, desire can naturally evolve and change. So just because for a certain period of time one partner has more desire and the other less, it does not necessarily mean that it's going to stay that way. It can also fluctuate and change, and then the partner that had the higher desire before all of a sudden doesn't feel as much desire. There are so many circumstances in our life that impact desire. It's the medications we're taking, how much sunshine we're getting, if we are working out, if we're stressed at work. Basically everything can impact desire. So desire can change, and that is very normal. However, when there is a really big desire discrepancy and it's actually putting strain on the relationship, then it is worth looking into if there are any underlying issues. Oftentimes, those can be issues with communication or unresolved problems. What kills desire more than anything is to feel unseen by your partner. So having conversations that are validating for both and that feel emotionally safe, and also to create intimacy through non-sexual activities is crucial. Sometimes it can also about not wanting sex, but about not wanting the sex that you're usually having with your partner. Especially straight couples often have a huge emphasis on intercourse, which is not always the best way to have sex for every individual. So it is also worth exploring all the other ways to have sex and to experience sexual intimacy, but they may sometimes look different. They may sometimes look like touching each other, being naked together, making out, or experiencing just other ways of having sexuality that is not intercourse. Unfortunately, I cannot go too deep into that on YouTube, but I think you're kind of getting what I'm saying. So just to finish this point, if one is desiring sex much less, maybe the sex that the couple is having is just not working for one of the two partners, and it's worth exploring a bunch of other things. Yes. It is also incredibly important to negotiate with curiosity, empathy, and love. Putting any kind of pressure on having sex will have the opposite effect. Nothing kills desire long-term more than having sex that you are not enjoying and that you are not excited about. So you should never ever be having sex if you're not in the mood. So it's not about giving in, it's about creating desire within you. For a lot of couples, it can be a beautiful little idea to keep sex on the table during the day, sending flirty little text, making compliments, keeping touch active, so just like a touch on the arm, a little kiss here and there, can make the world of a difference, especially if there is a difference in the desire types that the partners have. I don't know if you've heard about spontaneous versus responsive desire. Well, spontaneous desire is where you get pretty much in the mood out of the blue. You may be peeling potatoes and all of a sudden you are so in the mood to have sex. But if the other partner has responsive desire, so desire in response to touch and to intimacy, there can be a clash. So it's definitely worth figuring out which type you are. And if you notice that one of the partners has responsive desire, then this is great information to be able to create a mood by gentle touch, by kissing, by spending some quality time. And of course, it doesn't have to lead to sex, but more often than not, it could. Again, before we move on to the next question, I do want to also add that if those desire differences run deep and they're overwhelming or create mental strain on the relationship, I advise to actually look for a couples therapist that can better help the individual case. Obviously, whatever I'm suggesting here, this applies to everything I'm saying, is very broad and it may not apply to every single situation. So always take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. The next question is going to be, why is it problematic to enjoy imagining your partner with someone else? The simple answer to this question is, it's not problematic to do that. Fantasy is a different world than reality. I also want to say that this kind of fantasy is incredibly common and incredibly normal. For many, it creates a lot of desire to imagine their partner being desired by someone else, and it's sometimes called this compersion kink, the idea of your partner just having amazing, sexy times with someone else. It also plays with jealousy as sexual fuel and can be very exciting for a lot of people. While it may be in some cases, it is not necessarily about wanting this to happen in real life. The fantasy world can be just that, a fantasy, to create excitement and fantasize about things you usually wouldn't encounter in real life. The reason why some people may see it as problematic is that we are sometimes fed this toxic idea that if you're really in love with someone, then you should want them only for yourself and they're yours and no one else's. No one else should look at them. Which, I think it comes from this kind of toxic framework. It's important to say that these fantasies do not reflect the commitment level of the partner who's experiencing those fantasies. The only way this kind of fantasy can become a problem is if you want to pressure your partner into doing things with someone else that they don't really feel like doing. If you have a partner that really cannot imagine having something with someone else, but you want them to, and you put pressure on that situation, that is where things can go wrong. The rule of thumb in those situations is anything goes if both are excited about it, if the communication is there and no one gets hurt. The next question is, how could a threesome affect the relationship? This question is rather complex to answer because it really depends completely on the case. It could be a disaster and ruin the relationship, or it could be a fun experience for both. The first and most important thing here is, if a couple wants to have that experience, then they both need to be really excited about it. They both really need to want that. Where it goes wrong is where one does this because the other one is excited about it, kind of goes along to make the partner happy. That is where it really can go wrong. Also, I would never advise to do something like that if you feel like you should have done it because everyone is doing it or because it's very normalized in explicit content online. Sometimes we create a lot of pressure in what we have to experience in our lives, and we want to have an exciting sex life, of course, and we want to explore things and do things. But then sometimes we can feel like, you know, my friends have done this, maybe I need to also do it once in my life, kind of to get it out of the way, to have done it. If that is your motive, I would take a breath, take a step back and tell yourself that you don't have to do anything. Sex is about enjoying something. If you're really excited about it, that can be something to explore. But if you want to do it to have done it, then I would maybe not suggest it. One thing I also want to talk about, because I think it's really important in this topic, is gender assumptions and the male gaze. Explicit content online has made it very much normal to portray threesomes always as 2 women and 1 man. However, if we are talking about a straight couple, completely straight, then assuming that a woman will join is actually really downplaying women's pleasure, and we are not really seeing eye to eye here in an equal way. Because what benefit does she have if she's not attracted to women? Then we could get into this, yeah, she does it for him, which that is a no-no. So, if a straight couple is thinking about experiencing a threesome, then both genders need to be on the table. All genders may join, depending on what the partners find attractive. The next thing I want to mention is that obviously before it happens, it is incredibly important to have a long conversation. What are the do's and the don'ts? Really make sure no boundaries are being crossed and nothing happens that is unexpected or could hurt one of the partners. So the bottom line here is that a threesome is neither good or bad for the relationship. It really depends on the level of excitement of the 2 partners and their ability to communicate well, set boundaries, and respect each other's wishes without letting gendered assumptions get into the way and without pressuring anyone to do anything. Now we're going to move on to the next question, which is, can you talk about how withholding sex from a man can make them care for you more? This is upsetting to me. Why can I not have sex with a man right away? Because apparently they don't respect a woman who gives it up easily. When I read this, I really felt your upset and your pain around this, because I think this is something that has been suggested to female presenting people a lot, and it's actually incredibly sad. Oftentimes men are taught to see women as conquests, whereas women are taught that their purity matters to get respect from a guy, which creates an incredibly toxic narrative that does not fuel respect and mutual boundaries at all. It is not fair that somehow the women have the responsibility to manage men's respect. And the idea that a man will stop respecting a woman because of something they both did is just ridiculous. So overall, respect should have nothing to do with when you decide to have sex with someone. And my very simple answer to this question is, if someone will lose respect for you for sharing intimacy with him, then that is not the person for you. That does not sound like a safe partner to me. And if someone loses respect for you because he has these gendered ideas of what men and women should do when it comes to having sex or waiting to have sex, then that also does not sound like a safe partner. There are men that will certainly respect you no matter when you sleep with them, and will simply be excited and glad that you want to do that with them, and that will appreciate you for it. And in this case, I may say that it's worth looking for those instead of waiting to sleep with someone because they have these weird ideas so that they will respect you. The next question is, what is aftercare and why does it matter? Aftercare is the ways we take care of ourselves and our partner after having shared intimacy, oftentimes a sexual experience. It's about slowing down, reconnecting, and making sure that both people feel good physically and mentally. This is because sex stirs up a lot of emotions, it can bring vulnerabilities to life, and also it stirs up a bunch of hormones. So taking a little bit of time to integrate all of that after having had sex is actually very important. Sometimes people think aftercare is really important after a one-night stand, but doesn't really apply to a relationship because anyway you see each other every day. This is not really true. Sex is always an emotional thing, so aftercare always matters. Aftercare may look like cuddling or holding hands. It may look like making some tea or sharing a snack, or going for a walk, getting some fresh air and just talking a little bit about what happened or about something else. It doesn't really matter what it looks like, it just matters that there is something happening, so that it's not the case that people go their each individual ways immediately. Next question. How do you bring up the topic of protection without killing the mood? I think the reason why we associate using protection so much with killing the mood is because that aspect of sexuality is not really shown in movies, in shows. It's never mentioned in books. We don't see it in explicit online content. And when we talk about it, which oftentimes was very briefly in school with a teacher who was very awkward about it, we probably felt very strange. So I think it makes sense that we have this association between, talking about protection and it being awkward, because we have not really had a good example of what it could look like. But truthfully, it does not have to be awkward at all. It can actually be a tool that fuels trust and creates a lot of intimacy because both decide that they want to be safe and take care of themselves and the other person. You don't have to make it all technical and talk about it super seriously. Like, you can use a playful tone. For example, if you are noticing it is really getting to that point, you may say something like, "Wow, I was hoping this would happen, but I came prepared." And then you whip out the condom or the dental dam or whatever you're going to be using. So this way you have kind of created this happy excitement around it and just integrated using protection as a normal part of the experience. Another way, if you want to do it even before, which it's always good to talk about it early, would be to text to your partner something like, "Oh my god, I can't wait to see you. Do you think I should buy some condoms?" This way, of course, this only works when it's pretty clear that both want to have sex. Otherwise, this can create pressure, which then we don't want to happen. But as you can see, there are ways to make it playful, there are ways to integrate it in a way that feels nice and natural and doesn't have to be awkward. Some practical tips are to always have condoms nearby or even with you, to always be sure, or dental dams of course, or whatever you are using for protection. And remember, protection does not kill the mood, worrying about consequences later on does. Now I really feel like my sex ed teacher in high school. I think she said pretty much exactly that. The next question is also very interesting. It is, how can you deal with the pressure of being experienced enough when something like body count gets brought up? Now, I find this a really interesting question because I think a lot of people have the assumption that the amount of people we've had sex with equals experience, which that actually could not be further from the truth. More partners do not equal more skill. It can even be the case that the opposite is true. If someone thinks a person is going to like something just because another person or a couple other people liked it, then you can actually find yourself in a situation where you have a bad experience because you're doing something that the other person actually is not enjoying. Sex is not a Pokemon game. You don't level up when you catch them all. It doesn't work like that. Real skill comes from being present, curious, and open to communication and adjustment. And especially if you hadn't had many partners, you may even be better at being really curious and really open to whatever suggestions there are. Having had many partners can even give you a false sense of confidence that is not necessarily called for, because it is super important to remember every single person you have sex with is different from the other. We are all so different, and just because one thing worked for one person does not mean it will work for the next. Honestly, I really mean it when I say that you can be an amazing lover even with zero experience. Because it's really less about what exactly you do with your body and more about the way that you are able to attune to your partner to figure out what they enjoy and what you can enjoy together. So, closing line. The number of partners you've had does not define you. What defines you as a good lover is your ability to be curious, open, and able to communicate. The next question is, how can you deal with anxiety if you've not had sex for months? And I would honestly answer this question just like the last one. Sex is not a skill set that you learn and perfect, and then you can just do it every time you have sex. It doesn't work like that. Either way, you have to start over and create a shared experience with someone. It doesn't matter if you've had sex with someone the last day. As I said before, maybe it would even be counterproductive, because then you would assume, oh, this person yesterday liked this, you will like this, which is not necessarily true. So it really doesn't matter if you've not had sex for months or even years. You can always have a nice sexual experience with someone. But also, if sexual performance anxiety is something that you do struggle with a lot, it's incredibly common and incredibly normal, just because how we are shown sexuality in the media is not very realistic. So having these worries and these fears is so common. And if you're interested, I have created both an EFT tapping sequence as well as a meditation to deal with sexual performance anxiety. I hope I remember to link them here, otherwise you will easily find them on my channel. And yeah, you may find them helpful. Of course, if the anxiety is really impacting you and your life, again, I advise to talk to a professional. Question 9, and actually also the last question, is: how do you ask for consent in a way that feels natural and not robotic? So again, I think we have this kind of misconception here that consent is this like awkward question that you ask in the beginning, and then it's yes or no, and then you continue or not. But actually, consent is woven into the conversation and should be woven into intimacy more or less consistently and constantly. As I have talked about before, consent is always specific. So if you consent to one sexual act does not mean you will consent to another. So anyway, consent needs to be ongoing throughout the whole sexual experience, and it can actually be incredibly simple and playful. Consent can also, for example, look like asking, hey, do you like that? Or, hey, do you want me to keep doing that? Or, hey, do you want me to go a little slower? Or, is there anything you really want me to try? There's a lot of things that you can ask your partner that will give them the chance to consent. And they can also ask you, that gives you the chance to consent over and over again. And yeah, really have it be a part of the intimacy that you're sharing. Also, consent is not just verbal. It's also important to check for body cues. Now, I'm not talking here about wetness or orgasms, because how I talked about it before, those are actually not indicators of liking. No. You need to check for body language signs that could include the tone of the voice or the overall. Like, you will see a difference if a body is towards you and really like into it, or if they maybe pull away a little bit. Eye contact is also a big indicator. Are they holding eye contact, or are they maybe looking away a little bit? That could indicate some kind of discomfort. Of course, like, only verbal consent is real consent. So you cannot just look at someone and assume they're liking something, but it can be helpful cues. For example, if someone is kind of turning away or looking away, this may be a good moment to ask, like, hey, are you alright? Do you want to continue, or would you prefer to stop? Also, consent, I feel like it sounds weird, but honestly, consent is sexy. If you are someone who negotiates consent in an open and warm way, then you can create an incredible amount of safety and intimacy with someone, and that can be so attractive. Thank you so much for watching. We have now come to the end of this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I have enjoyed all of your questions very much. I think you've asked me wonderful questions and I'm very excited about them. And yeah, again, I want to tell you, if you have more questions, leave me those in the comments. We are still such a cozy little community. I will see them and I will answer them. Alright, I hope you liked this video. I hope you learned something. That would be great, actually. And I already am looking forward to see you next time. Bye!